In my last video, I showed you how I pre-plan my landscape images by going out to the location the day before to see exactly where I want to be. When I got to my spot and the light was just right, I started the process of creating images. I'll show you how I created the images for this landscape image, and I'll show you step by step how I process those images in the computer to make Focus Stacked HDR images using the Nikon Z9. All that coming up. Hi, Terry Vanderheiden here. The process of creating Focus Stacked HDR images sounds complex, but it's really pretty simple. And I'll show you a recreation of how I did just that on that location. So you'll be able to make your own Focus Stacked HDR images with whatever camera you use. I'll then take you to the computer and show you how the image is finished and what programs I use to do all that with, all in step-by-step fashion. But before we get started with that, I'd like to tell you why I Focus Stack. I'm always looking for the highest quality in my images. I've been a professional photographer for many years, and getting the best quality and the sharpest images can set you apart when it comes to selling your photography. And a lot of times that's what we all want to do. For years, I've used very wide depth of field f-stops like f22, f29 to get the maximum depth of field in a shot. And it's still a viable way of creating images that have full focus across the entire image. But is it the best way? When the digital cameras came along and offered the ease of doing focus stacking in camera, I saw this as a better process to create images with full depth of field. After all, instead of shooting at f22 and introducing diffraction or lower quality image sharpness into my images, I can shoot full focus images at a much sharper f-stop, like say f5.6 on this lens. And with my camera, in my case the Z9, changing the focus for me for each shot, the process can be pretty simple. Just a note about focus stacking. While this technique works great most of the time, if you have anything moving in your frame, this may not be the best choice. While the software can do some aligning of the images for you, the grasses that might be blowing around or something being moved with the wind won't work as well because it may not be aligned when it comes to the focus stacking software. So sometimes that tiny aperture of f22 might be your only choice. So Nikon calls focus stacking focus shift shooting, and it's a menu item found at the very bottom of the photo shooting menu. I use the focus stacking feature quite often, so much so that I've created a shortcut by putting the focus shift shooting option into my menu, and that's a feature that the Z9 offers. That way I can easily get to it and not have to scroll around looking for it each time. Once you get the focus stacking figured out, how do you accomplish the bracketing of images in case you want to use HDR or the layer mask to build a proper exposure in your focused images? More on that in a minute. If you'd like to learn more about focus stacking and how you can use focus stacking to create sharper images, check out my ebook, Razor Sharp Nature Photography. This book covers many aspects of sharpness in nature photography, including diffraction and focus stacking. The goal of this book is to make it easy for you to be on your way producing razor sharp images yourself. You can get this instantly downloadable ebook, Razor Sharp, only at my website, imagelight.com. Just go to the digital products page and download it instantly to put it on your iPad, your iPhone, or your computer. I appreciate all the photographers who've already purchased Razor Sharp Nature Photography. And like with every purchase, it helps me create more videos like this. So thanks again. All right, so I've set up, gone with the 24 to 70 zoom lens, and I'm right about 35 millimeters, 34 millimeters, something like that. I'm going to use the case magnetic polarizer, so I'll just slap that on. And again, I'm shooting this, trying to get the foreground sharp as well as the background, and I'm using the polarizer to get the best tones in this water. So I'm able to get not only the tones in the water, but I'm also able to get the reflections in the grasses to look a lot better. So as I set this up, I'm ready to go. Now what I want to do is I've shot this already at f/18, and because of diffraction, I know that's not going to be as sharp as it could be. So in order to make this super sharp, I'm going to do a focus stack. We know how to do that. If you ever want to know how to do focus stacking on the Z9, I have a video. I'll post a link up there for you to take a look at. But I go down to the bottom, grab a focus at the very bottom, and then I have it on a quick menu item for focus shift shooting, and I'll just let it run. So as this runs, it's taken a different shot at f/5.6, and then we'll put it together later in Helicon and focus stack that all together, taking the sharpest parts. But one of the things that can be a little bit of a problem is we don't have the ability to do an HDR this way. So the way I do it is I start again, come back, refocus in the beginning, and then I take and lower my shutter speed by 2 stops, and that's going to be my dark end that I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this same stack again. So we're going to go here, hit start, and let it do another stack. It's only taken about 6 or 8 images to create this stack. And I've done one that's in the center in terms of my exposure. I've done one that's really dark in terms of the exposure, which in this case is going to help, particularly with the sky, because it's pretty blown out compared to the darkness of what we have here in the foreground. But then I'll also do another one that's going to lift all the tones in this water area, this dark area, and that way I'll have 3 images that I'll go into Helicon and focus stack them, and then take those 3 images and put them in and do an HDR out of it. So now I'm just going to go overexpose now. My original one was at at an 80th of a second. Remember to get my focus back where it was, and we'll try this again. So now we're shooting at a 30th of a second, and that's going to be overexposed to give me more depth in this foreground if I want. So let's go ahead and start this. So when you're doing focus stacking with a wide angle lens, it doesn't take many images. This is only going to take about, that's 4 images, because once it gets to infinity, it'll stop. So 5 images, 6 images, so now we know that up to 7. Okay, 7 images is what it takes to create that stack, so that's going to be really fast. Now the last thing I do before I'm done, I usually try to put this back to where I had it, and then take a shot of my hand. That way when I look into Lightroom, I'm going to have this stack set up like that. Just like I do with the HDRs, I'm going to have a real easy way to see where a stack starts and stops. The process is simple. Create a set of focus stacked images at an average exposure shot on manual. Be careful when touching the camera so as not to move it if you can avoid it. Then change the shutter speed to create a series of stacked images 2 stops darker, then do it all again at 2 stops brighter. If a landscape image takes, say, 7 images to create your stack, you'll have 3 times that, or 21 images for each composition. 7 shots right on the average exposure, 7 shots 2 stops darker, and 7 shots 2 stops brighter than the average exposure. If your Nikon Z9 is set up like mine with back button focusing, when you start your second set of exposures, the focus box should not have changed from the first shot, and this is one of the positive aspects of using back button focus. You can check out a video I'll post here on how to set your camera up for back button focus. So you just tap the back button focus button. It grabs the focus in the same spot that you started with on that last series of focus stacked images. This will give you repeatable results. Next, let's go into the computer and I'll show you how this all gets put together. If you're enjoying this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and then don't forget to ring the bell to be reminded of my next video. All right, so we're in the computer, and what we're going to do is we're going to get into Lightroom, and we're also going to use Helicon Soft, which is the software that I use for stacking photographs. And I'll show you the step-by-step of how we do it. So as you look here, got to put my glasses on to do the see the screen a little bit better. So what we do is we can see all the images I shot that morning. We've got my hand here, which is going to show us where we're actually starting on our series, because if I had other images in this series, this makes it super easy for me to find the images that I want to work with. So here they are. It looks like there's 10 or so of these images that are shot in the average exposure. Again, we shot these all on manual, so this is how this is going to look. All right, so we highlight them all, but before we do this, what I want to do is come over here and make a couple of smart collections, because smart collections for me is a way for me to organize my images and have the computer do some of the work to do it. So we go over to collections and we go down and do create smart collection. And then I put in, this is going to be where my TIFFs are going to reside. So we'll pull this down and go to file name type, go to file type, and then we'll put in TIFF. So that's going to create a smart collection over here. We can see it has 0 in it so far. That's smart collection. So every time that we produce a TIFF file, it's going to go right into that collection. So we're going to do one more, create another smart collection, and we're going to call this HDR. So this one, instead of file type, we're just going to call it file name. So we'll go over to file name, and inside of that name has to contain HDR. So now we've got HDR in there as a smart collection. So anything that's labeled HDR is going to go into this smart collection, and anything that's labeled TIFF is going to go into the TIFF collection. All right, so let's get back to all of our images. And we'll grab the first 10, which are all done at the normal exposure. We're going to right-click and go into Export, and then down to Helicon Focus. And I do the Helicon Focus TIFF. I just prefer that better. So we click on that. It opens up Helicon Focus. And then all these images, you can see up here, all the images are being processed by Lightroom into TIFFs. And you can see they all line up over here. So you can see that each one is labeled with a TIFF. So it's converted from a raw file into a TIFF file at this point. And then we have different methods in Helicon. And for me, the method that I'm going to use is method C, which is a pyramid. So then I hit render, and then this will start rendering all of those images. You can kind of look here on the black and white version. You can see the images sharpening up as it goes. And it doesn't take very long. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go up here and hit File, Save. And then we go to Save. I'm going to save it in the same folder that my Lightroom folder of this demonstration is in. But I'm going to just call this Teton 001. And it's going to be a TIFF, and we'll hit Save. Now, a funny thing about Helicon is, for whatever reason, it won't send it back to Lightroom until I quit Helicon. So let's go up here and we quit Helicon Focus, and then it'll come back. And you can see down here in the TIFFs that that TIFF file was brought back into Lightroom. I don't have to search for it because it's right there. Kind of nice to have it real simple and easy to find. So let's go back into our images that we started with, and we'll do the next set. So this is the 2 stops darker images. So we grab all of those and we right click, go to Export, and go to Helicon Focus TIFF, and let the camera or the computer do the work. And it's going to, in this case, it was 9 photographs that it's using, and it'll find the sharpness if you use 7 or 8 photographs, whatever it is. You can see they're all stacked over here. I'm going to hit render again, and you'll see it start rendering out the sharpness of each one. So then I go here, go to Save, and I'm going to call this Teton 002. Again, it's going back into the same folder where my Lightroom images are, and also it's going to be labeled as a TIFF. So we'll hit save, okay, quit Helicon Focus, and now we're back in here, and now you see on the TIFFs, we've got 2 images. So when we click into that collection, you can see there's now 2 images there. So let's go back to this final one, and this is going to be the bright ones that were overexposed by a couple of stops. And then I'm going to right click, export, and go Helicon Focus one more time. I know it's a little repetitive, but it's an easy way to learn this if you just do it a couple of times. And what I encourage, anytime you see something on Lightroom, either by me or anybody else, go open Lightroom and figure out how to do it and do it. Do it a couple of times. That way you'll really learn it and it'll get into your memory of how to actually do something on Lightroom, rather than watching episodes of how to do different processes in Lightroom. But you got to go try it. Right after you watch it, go try it, and it really helps you retain it. So here we go. We're back in here. We've got this last one done. We're going to go up to File, and we're going to go Save, and then we're going to go call this Teton 003. Clever naming system I've got here. We'll hit Save. Okay, and then we'll quit Helicon Focus. And sure enough, we've got 3 TIFFs in there now, and they're all of the different exposures that we worked with. So now we're back into Lightroom, so we're going to use Lightroom to work our HDR. So we grab all 3 of these. I hold down the Shift key and then select all of them, and then I right click, and then I go into Photo Merge and go HDR. So now it's going to create, and you can see what it's done here. It's created an HDR, and we'll just say Merge. And we'll let Lightroom do all this work. It's going to be creating the HDR. And look at here. Now my HDR can be found super simple right inside of the HDR collection, smart collection that we made. So whenever you do this and you make a whole bunch of HDRs, this is where you can find them if you've got a smart collection created. So now we've got this image, which is pretty close to our final. We just would like to lighten up this area. Now, if you look at this closely, you'll see down here on the details that this is called HDR, which is the labeling process that helps us find it. It's also a DNG, which means it's a raw file. So we go into develop, and now we have a lot of latitude that we can do to work with this image. So as we look at this, we can see that it's a little darker here than I'd like. So what we'll do is we'll go in and we'll grab a gradient filter. So let's do a linear gradient, and we're just going to drive that up from about here. And this is the area that we want to, we'll show the overlay so you can see it. So this is all the area that's going to be affected. And now we're going to take our exposure and we're going to lighten up the exposure there. We can also take and do another mask. We'll create another mask up here. And this time we're going to do a radial gradient. And we're going to grab this and run it right in through here. So now you can see that this radial gradient is showing us everything that's going to be affected by our next move. The only thing here that we have to consider is how is our feather? So this is our feather here at 50%. So maybe we want to feather this a little bit more so that it's a little softer and it's not quite as apparent where our action is going to take place. So again, we're going to take our exposure and we're just going to lift the exposure just a little bit in that area, and allows us to see into those reeds just a little bit. So you can do this on any part of this image that you want to do. And once you're done, it's going to save itself, all of the work that you've done, go back into library mode, and now we've got our final image that we can export and do with whatever we want. And there's all kinds of levels that you can take to tune this up. You can go in using Lightroom, go in the develop module and grab another mask. And let's say, okay, in this one, we want to create a new mask and it's going to be a sky mask. So let's go ahead and select sky. We'll let Lightroom select the sky for us. And then we can actually maybe bring the exposure down just a little bit. We could, if we wanted to, change the color of that just a tiny bit. Click on color and add a little bit of violet to that sky, maybe a little bit of blue, deeper blue. So depending on what you want to do, you can add colors if you want, or you can add no colors. We'll just add just a little bit of extra blue there. And you have the ability to, work on this just like you would any other raw file. So that's how it's done. So you take your images, you stack them together, you stack each one through Helicon Focus. Once they're stacked, then bring them into, they'll be back in Lightroom, and then you go in there and create an HDR, and now you've got HDR Focus Stacked images. So that's how I do focus stacking with bracketing so that I can create focus stacked HDR images. Thanks for watching, and until next time, this is Terry Vanderheiden.